Uh,
Jay Kaplan, Anthony Strait, good evening. My name is Stephen Rabinowitz. Upon the news that we've heard today, I would just like to ask you a simple question, Anthony. Do you judge your team successfully making a trade based on the Madden rating of the player?
I would say this. Personally, I would think my Madden rating was probably an 83 at best. I mean, you get that from a role player, but no, I would never base a trade in real life on job. I have to actually encourage people to realize that real life sports is not exactly a video game. So I'm not exactly not sure what the hell Willie Johnson is smoking these days. But whatever he's smoking, I want some of it.
Jay, do you want some of that stuff that Woody Johnson is smoking? I would assume not.
When have I ever wanted anything that Woody Johnson is smoking, eating, just flat out just saying? Because some of the
So,
stuff that comes out of that man's mouth just has you going, he said what?
so many things, but that's not what the show is about tonight. Damn you, Thursday
Oh,
athletic pieces. I'm Stephen Rabinowitz, a solid 80 on Madden for my podcasting skills, and this is the On the Sports Lines CFP playoff preview. 'Twas the night before the CFP, and all through college football houses, sorry, no creatures were stirring. That's a health code violation. We don't need that going. College football CFP first round happens this weekend, and if a team is claiming about how one team has an unfair home field advantage, it's actually a fair earned home field advantage now. Thank you very much. Games are at campuses for this first weekend of games, which starts tomorrow. We will preview the four first round matchups, and since this is our last show of the year, we'll also preview the four quarterfinals as best as we can. But as we enter the last regular show of 2024, we have some firsts to start with. Bill Belichick, the coach that can claim the most Super Bowl rings for a head coach with six, not to mention those he won as an assistant coach with the Giants, got to remember about the good days, is about to try a first for him. College head coach. Last week, Coach Sunshine nabbed himself a deal to be the coach of the North Carolina Tar Heels, a team that hasn't been to their championship game, by the way, in 45 years. Will get the guidance of a coach who has won 302 times in the regular season in the NFL. His dad was an assistant coach there in 1954, and Bill will be a father figure himself. He becomes the oldest head coach in the FBS, but he is younger, by the way, by a year than the man he's taking over for, and that's the recently fired Mac Brown. A lot to pack in this one, Anthony. Will the hoodie successfully trade in his Patriot blue for Carolina blue with ease?
well, I would say this. The price of sleeveless hoodies on campus kind of gone up 20% since last week. But
Gotta
besides
get
the
that money
point here,
going up.
by the way, another North Carolina tie for Bill Belichick. One of his former players, the great Lawrence Taylor, is from obviously played at UNC, so
Yeah,
that kind of that's a tie there. Um, it's a surprise, I think, for a lot of people that Bill Belichick would take a coaching job in college, considering he's so synonymous with the National Football League. But I'm curious to see how this buyout after July 1st kind of plays out because think about this. Bill Belichick is only what 22 wins away from Don Shula, the all-time record for wins. And I always felt like Bill Belichick was eventually going to get back into coaching in the NFL. I think this is just a pit stop as far as Bill Belichick wanting to coach again. Of course, you see him on television all this season, whether it's inside the NFL, whether it's the Madden cast, or whether it's popping up on Pat McAfee's show. He's still got the coaching bug. It's clearly there. I'm quite sure the competitive person that he is. The way things ended in New England not as left a sour taste in his mouth, but it is interesting that with North Carolina, he's going to have kind of total control like he had in New England as far as player personnel and who he brings in. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how this first year plays out. I mean, I was reading earlier that there's been a couple of players that's transferring to UNC because of Bill Belichick. So let's see how things play out. Has spring practice comes up and eventually the summer days where camp starts up. But what it is going to be, it's going to make the Tar Heels must see TV, especially for ESPN, who covers the ACC. So expect next season to see Bill Belichick get the Deion Sanders treatment, get a lot of key nationally televised windows as far as the Tar Heel games are concerned, and we'll see if his rigid coaching philosophy uh and coaching style on and off the field, how it works with essentially kids, college students. I mean, it is actually rub grown adults the right way as far as guys have played for him. Of course, that actually led to championships as well. So he comes in he comes to North Carolina with a championship pedigree and a reputation for winning. Now it's just a matter of, can he turn college program around the same way he turned the New England Patriots around once upon a time.
Jay, you and I have a little bit of a different opinion on this one. It's time to see who's going to win the press conference. Now you got to actually win the games to go along with.
Oh man, yeah, I didn't use those exact words, which were written by Stuart Mandel, who's the senior columnist and editor-in-chief of college football for The Athletic. But they kind of summed up my initial reaction once I got over the shock and surprise. And here's the quote, and Rabbi, you kind of just alluded to it. Congratulations, North Carolina. You managed to hire someone completely unqualified to be your next football coach. You did that thing so many schools do where they try to win the press conference instead of win football games. It rarely works. As Anthony said, the 72-year-old Belichick has never coached a day in college football, never recruited an athlete, never had to deal with the transfer portal or NIL collectives. Those last two, combined with players seemingly more concerned with how much more money they could get and what would be in it for them, as opposed to how they could earn more playing time and help the team win, were the final straws that led to his good pal Nick Saban retiring as the head football coach at Alabama. Along with the whole age thing, Saban is 73 years old and said at his age, quote, it gets harder and harder to promise people you're going to be there for 4 or 5 more years. You add to that Belichick's well-known proclivity towards grumpiness and introvertedness, two personality traits that don't really go hand in hand when trying to entice recruits to come to Chapel Hill and getting donors to give more of their money to the football program, or motivating 18 to 22-year-olds to do everything the Belichick way, whether they understand it or not. And it's not unreasonable to wonder, talking about smoking something, what UNC AD Bubba Cunningham was smoking when he went all in on bringing the 6-time Super Bowl winning coach to one of the few D1 schools where football takes a definitive backseat to basketball. Though the Tar Heels basketball team not off to a great start this year. I agree with Mandel that, quote, it's delusional to think that Belichick will show up, flash his rings, and suddenly North Carolina will start producing more high-end NFL players than Georgia or Ohio State. Look, on the practice field and on game day, actual football stuff, Belichick can probably be successful at UNC, 10-win seasons, top 25 rankings, stuff like that. He still has a brilliant football mind and still knows how to coach players and how to scheme up game plans. I even think that if he puts the right staff together, especially ones with experience recruiting players, he can bring his type of players to UNC, ones with the intelligence and character and toughness that he holds in high regard. But can he consistently bring in 4 and 5-star players? And can he keep them and get them to buy into his way of doing things, which may be a damn sight tougher and more of a grind than they're used to? Especially, as I noted earlier, when some of them will counter his whole, I won 6 Super Bowls and I can get you ready to play in the NFL with, how much are you going to pay me while I'm here? I also don't think he truly understands the difference between the NFL calendar and a college football calendar. The year is completely different in terms of responsibilities for a coaching staff, especially the head coach. The NFL season, yeah, it has more games, but the calendar year in itself is much shorter. The coaches actually get a break during this summer where they can step away from football, relax, unwind, go on vacation, spend actual time with their family and friends. Hell, turn their phones off. College football, yeah, it has a shorter regular season, but with recruiting, two portal periods, spring ball, and all the other demands on his time, there really isn't an off season like Belichick was used to in the NFL. Ultimately, I think those year-round demands on his time, especially the off-the-field stuff, the selfishness of some of these youngsters, having to deal with donors and boosters, those NIL collectives, and the other things he'll have no control over, like he did in New England, will make him leave well before that 5-year, $50 million contract is up. Bruce Feldman, senior writer and National College Football Insider for The Athletic, summed it up pretty well. Quote, I just think that the existence as a college football head coach now will ultimately drive him away. It's like dog years. 3 years feels like 21. There's just too much chaos, too much dysfunction, too many clowns he'll have to deal with. At some point, Bill Belichick will realize, much like his old friend Nick Saban did, I just don't need all of this. Not at this age, not after all I've accomplished. Look, I genuinely wish the hoodie all the luck in the world. I have a feeling he's going to need it, even at UNC.
Well, the thing is that you just mentioned is he's going into a conference that is kind of ripe for the taking just because of the fact that Miami and Clemson are like the top of the food chain over there, but they're not consistent national top teams. Like he's not competing with Georgia and Ohio State, at least to begin with. He's competing with Clemson, Duke, Wake Forest, and all of those teams. So you have the chance to have a little bit of a shorter playing ground. I think he is as better a coach, I think, than you would think for college football, only because of the fact that the transfer portal is all about what kind of clout that you have. Yes, you're going to be paid money, but that's not his job to provide the money. That's North Carolina's job to provide the money to the players. So he can only do the stuff on the field. I don't think on the field is going to matter as much as you think, because I think in college football, unless it's a situation like Ryan Day coaching against Michigan, that on the field stuff is not necessarily going to matter as much. It depends on what players you have against what other teams that you're playing. And so it does seem like a weird move. And the one thing that I would be it does seem like a weird move, but I don't mind it. He did bring in Michael Lombardi. It was one of his guys who has been one of his key guys for years to kind of be the GM of this team. And guess what? Yes, there are college GMs now because you have to deal with all of this shit. And that is the transfer portal and all of that. There is one thing I will say to this that could make this a terrible move. There is a $10 million buyout if he leaves sometime in this season coming up. There is a $1 million buyout the rest of the way if he leaves after any season. So I worry that Bill Belichick does want to make one more attempt at the NFL. There were rumors that the Jets talked to him this week, and the Jets were not completely 100% interested. Again, gotta love the New York Jets. But I really am very interested to see how this happens. It's different. And I think it also can also just show what the landscape of college football is. It's not about what you do on the field. It's about how you get to the Saturdays on the field. And again, there is no true off season, but I think for a guy like Bill Belichick, who is a coaching lifer, I don't think Bill Belichick ever knew what the meaning of off season before football was, unless it had to deal with his 26-year-old girlfriend. So I think it'll be very, very interesting to see a new era for Bill Belichick. But again, just be aware, you go back to the NFL.
Maybe.
I would say this.
Very curious situation.
I would say this too. Bill Belichick, homecoming weekend is going to be very interesting for him, just for the reason you just mentioned. His 1/8 of his age girlfriend. That's good. You know what? You don't have to call campus security to keep an eye on him 1/8 during homecoming weekend.
By the way, I misspoke. It's 24. 4-year-old girlfriend, so I was dating someone a third of his age. I gotta
Oh,
love it,
boy.
Bill. All right, time for the college football playoff
Oh,
preview. And if you're going to host playoff games at campuses, you can't go wrong with having 4 of the 8 most successful programs of all time wearing the home jerseys this weekend. So we start where the weekend will end, Columbus, Ohio. The 8th-seeded Ohio State Buckeyes did not think that they were going to be in this position a short time ago. Not a good thing. The good vibes of a one-loss season with only a 1-point loss to Oregon on October 12th got clawed by the Wolverines with a true what the fuck moment. That was that game almost 3 weeks ago now in a 13-10 loss to Michigan. Ohio State gets the home game. No bye. And a
Nope.
Tennessee team coming in, which is not great in a one-game situation, having an SEC team come in. Jay, what's your key for OHIO to get to the ROSEBOWL?
Wow, that is a whole lot of spelling going on there, Rabbi.
Mm-hmm.
You
I
know,
learned.
and without spell check, I'm impressed, partner.
It
Um,
happens sometimes.
Hey, I talked about it after, these Buckeyes went down for the fourth straight time to the hated rival they referred to as that team up north. I refer to them as the Michigan Wolverines. That it seemed like Ryan Day coached as if he needed not only to beat Michigan, but beat them playing Wolverine football, which made absolutely zero sense. I mean, time and again, they attempted to run inside against one of the best defensive lines in the nation, despite having a definitive edge with playmakers on the perimeter. Led by senior Emeka Buka, sophomore Carnell Tate, and freshman Jeremiah Smith, the Buckeyes have one of the best wide receiver groups in the nation, but they didn't use them. And for some reason, Day kept sending running backs Quinshawn Judkins and Trevion Henderson into the teeth of the Michigan defense, despite having an offensive line that could not win the point of attack. Ohio State was held to just 77 yards rushing, 67 between the running backs, another 10 from quarterback Will Howard, and averaged just 3.0 yards per carry. They managed just 0.62 yards before contact per rush and just 2.3 yards after contact per rush, according to True Media Next Gen Stats. Not sure how, why Day thought his running game would tire out the Michigan defensive front, but it very much went the other way for him, and it made the Buckeyes offense one-dimensional. We all know how well that worked out. Without any semblance of a rushing attack, Ohio State had to rely on Howard's arm, and he had one of his worst games of the season. He was just 19 of 33. That's just 57.6% completion. A season low 175 yards passing, just 5.3 yards per attempt with a touchdown and 2 picks for a season low 100 flat passer rating. Granted, he had lousy pass protection from this underwhelming offensive line. Ohio State allowed 17 pressures. Howard was pressured on 50% of his dropbacks. Both were season worst marks, despite Michigan blitzing on just 5.9% of those dropbacks, which was the second lowest blitz rate the Buckeyes faced this season. But Howard also made some questionable decisions with the ball, again, largely due to the constant pressure. They cannot, and I can't stress this enough, they cannot do that again and expect to win against Tennessee. Another dom team with a dominant defensive line, well known for shutting down opponents' running game. The Vols allowed just 0.82 rushing yards before contact, number 1 in the nation, according to True Media. The Vols are also top 10 in the nation in tackles for losses and total rushing defense. Straight up, you can't run at Tennessee and expect to consistently and effectively gain yards, especially in the red zone where the Vols are allowing a touchdown on just 44.1% of possessions in the red zone, 4th best in the nation. But if they can hold up, but if the Buckeyes offensive line can hold up just long enough on pass plays against the Vols pass rush, led by edge rusher James Pierce, Howard and that trio of wide receivers can do some serious damage to the Vols secondary. Now, I don't expect the Buckeyes to abandon the running game. When you have a pair of running backs that combine for 1,556 yards and 14 TDs on the ground, you don't throw that part of the playbook out of the window, even against this Vols defense. But they need to play more to the matchup advantage they have. When Howard, who set career highs in completion percentage, 72.3, passing yards, 2,860 yards per attempt, 9.1, touchdowns, 27 against just 8 picks, and passer rating, 172.1, if he has time to throw, the Buckeyes have one of the most efficient passing attacks in the nation, as evidenced by the 28 of 35, 80% completion, 326 yards, 9.3 yards per attempt, 2 scores, no picks, and 177.1 passer rating Howard put up in the 32-31 loss in Eugene back in October. Smith's 57 catches for 934 yards at 16.4 average, plus his conference best and school freshman record 10 touchdowns, showed why he was the number one recruit in the class of 2024. Egbuka led the team with 60 receptions and was second to Smith, 743 yards, 12.4 average, and 9 scores. Tate rounded out the triumvirate, 41 catches, 583 yards, 14.2 average, 4 scores. These three have the talent to beat any coverage thrown at them, man or zone, and make contested catches in tight windows, especially in the red zone. If this Buckeyes offense, which was number 6 in the nation in points per drive and 9th in yards per play, can stay on schedule, their 49.9% success rate on first down was 9th in the nation, then they'll have Tennessee's defense on its heels, which will allow offensive coordinator Chip Kelly to use his entire playbook against them. If that happens, we'll see the type of offense we've come to expect from this Buckeye team. Hey, Ryan, yeah, listen to the Michigan fan here. You want to beat Tennessee? Don't go trying to prove how tough you are like you did against the Wolverines. Nobody, especially your fan base, cares if you prove that you're tough. They just care if you win.
And against Michigan, too, which is why Ryan Day needs to have a very, very good playoff run. I know the AD has said his job is safe, but you know what boosters can do. Okay, Anthony, ninth-seeded Tennessee has had some highs and lows. They beat Alabama at home in October, but were kind of dull in their biggest road game of the year when they lost 31-17 to Georgia in November. Anthony, your key for Nico, and I had to take a while to find the correct pronunciation. I am a Liava and the Bucks.
Well done.
Well, here's the thing. The Tennessee, they're gonna have to go with basically the Michigan formula for beating Ohio State. That's one of football. I mean, you have one of the best running backs in the backfield, and Dylan Sampson, a guy who was actually snubbed for the Walker Award for top running back in the nation. He ran for 1,485 yards and 22 touchdowns. But one of the things, too, was with the Volunteers, the offense, Josh Heupel likes to spread the ball around. But this is going to be a trend when we talk about the football games tonight. Whether it's going to be a factor for the weekend for 3 of these 4 playoff games, considering 2 of them is going to be at night, but 3 of the 4 games is going to be either in 2 of the games in Pennsylvania and 1 against Columbus, Ohio. This game, Saturday night, the forecast is expected to be in the teens by game time. So it calls for pound the football, run the football, and control the clock. But more importantly, what Michigan was able to do really was keep Ohio State's offense off the field as much as possible. And it showed when they did get on the field, that they were pretty much out of sync and one-dimensional, to say the least. But Sampson's best numbers is against a stacked 8-man front, which Ohio State loves to do. Against stacked 8-man fronts, he has 8 rushing touchdowns and 48 carries, 3 rushing yards per rush against a stacked 8 a stacked line. 5.8 yards per carry. Here's a crazy stat for this. I just had this. He only had 24 yards lost behind the line of scrimmage this season. So this is a guy who, when he touches the ball, he runs forward. He doesn't dance around. He gets to the line of scrimmage and hits his holes immediately, which is going to be a big thing. But also, and I'm just going to call him Nico for right now, because I do have the pronunciation here. Eli Lava, because I had to go on YouTube.
That's okay.
Yeah, later. I had to go on YouTube like 3 or 4 times to kind of hear it, but I still kind of riffed on it one. Anyway, he threw for 2,500 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. But he is also a dual threat who ran for 430 yards on the ground, which should be very important considering Ohio State's pass rush. It's important for Tennessee to, at the very least, take some shots downfield. I mean, Ohio State's secondary is really good, but you have to keep them honest. And then on the flip side of it, Ohio State's offensive line has really struggled, and which is custom made for James Pearson to have a big game. Even though his numbers this season has been down compared to last year, he can get around the edge and really be destructive and get to Will Howard. That would be very huge. And another thing too about the Volunteers is that they may want to play a little more zone since Will Howard's efficiency tends to dip as opposed to when he goes to go against man coverage, he against the blitz, he completes 77% of his passes against the blitz, but which Tennessee does 33% of the time. However, against the zone, it's completely the exact opposite. It's exact opposite, and he has thrown most of the interceptions against zone coverage. So I think that for the Volunteers defensively is they get the pass rush, but they may actually have to change up and play a little more zone because Ohio State have the wide receivers to get those one-on-one battles on the outside. And if you're not getting the Will Howard, you're going to get torched almost immediately as soon as the ball snaps. So for the Volunteers, it's pretty much going to be a case of run the ball and just play sound defense. And also, more importantly, try to get out to an early lead. Ohio State, now, Carl Hotree said this, and I kind of agree with him, and many Volunteer fans kind of take it as a kind of a personal shot. But Ohio State is probably the one team that probably don't want to be playing at home this weekend, considering everything that's gone on the last few weeks of Ryan Day, the loss to Michigan, the heat being turned up considerably. And if you can get out to an early lead, even if it's 7-0, 10-0, and Ohio State the offense starts to struggle, the pressure that's going to be that's going to be going on in Columbus, it's going to be go from 0 to 100 almost immediately, and that would really play into Tennessee's favor without question.
However, what you just said is if they're down 10-0, it'll actually force Ohio State to throw the ball. So that actually might be a better thing than you think. One thing that I need to note, Tennessee is 2-2. Outside of a neutral-ish game in Bristol Motor Speedway earlier this year, Tennessee is 2-2 on the road this year and fell behind in those 2 wins as well against Oklahoma and Vandy. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Tennessee's not the greatest of road teams. So the Oregon Ducks, the only undefeated team in the FBS in 2024, drew a pretty shitty Rose Bowl matchup. So they'll either get a rematch of a 1-point thriller against Ohio State, or they'll take on one of the SEC's best. Dylan Gabriel, though, doesn't really care. 6 seasons of eligibility this year at Oregon. I think we know the story. Chose the number 8 due to the only other CFP quarterback that Oregon has ever had. That's Marcus Mariota. And he'll be back leading the Ducks. He has had a great season, made it to New York for the Heisman, but wasn't going to win just because of the fact that there were just better numbers and better stories in terms of Travis Hunter, Nash, and Genty. Has 183 touchdowns, 149 via the pass, and 33 via the rush. He has a FBS record, 61 career starts now. That number is going to go up by at least 1, so he is going to be the quarterback with the most starts in the history of college football at the FBS level when we get to the Rose Bowl. They go again. The only time they finished the regular season undefeated was when they played for the BCS championship in the game in 2010. That was the season where they lost to Cam Newton and the Auburn Tigers. The numbers are just staggering out there. No, only 1 touchdown or 0 touchdowns in 2 of any of the games this year. His games at Michigan and at Wisconsin, but 60% completion percentage in every single game, through for 3,558 yards, and is just a slinger out there and is just a threat in all senses of the word. Now, if they get Ohio State in the Rose Bowl and Big Ten versus Big Ten in the Rose Bowl, I think Pasadena would be salivating at that, although they may still think because of their old ways that it's Pac-10 versus Big Ten. Nobody tell Pasadena that. It'll definitely feel like it. Gabriel had probably one of his best games of the year, 23 for 34, 341 yards. But the thing about Oregon is they are so deep in almost every single category of offense and defense Their rushing game has Jordan James. The receiving game has Tez Johnson. The defense has some studs on it. Oregon is the best team in this college football playoff and is a decent-sized favorite for me, especially with the injuries to Georgia, for them to get to the national title game and win it. But the road is not going to be easy. Where there's possibilities of playing Boise State and other teams in that national title second or that first round game. Getting that draw, especially even for Ohio State and Tennessee, is just not great. Will be very interesting to see. The Rose Bowl is the granddaddy of them all for a reason, and Oregon is going to be a very good opponent for whoever comes to town.
Hell yeah. Should be fun.
They say orange is the new black. Nah, Netflix, you're wrong. Orange is the new CFP playoff. As Clemson and Texas fight to see who is the true king of the orange, and they get a step closer to the CFP title. Sorry, Syracuse. I know you're ranked this season. Wish you could make it here. Fifth seeded Texas is up first, Anthony. They are a 2-loss team whose 2 losses just happen to be in that same Georgia team. Did they lose that second game at OT? Uh-huh. Did they allow only 12.5 points per game per season? Uh-huh. Did they beat a team that ended up in the top 25 of the CFP in the final standings? Nuh-uh. Anthony, Clemson is a top 25 team, so that'll be interesting. How does Texas win this?
It's on Quinn Ewers. Without question, he has to step up. And here's the thing: the SEC championship game. It's one thing to lose in overtime. It's another thing to throw for 358, throw 2 costly interceptions on 46 attempts, and you lost to a backup quarterback because Carson Beck was knocked out of the game, which made Ewers' inconsistencies even more apparent. And you go back to that game and how Texas really had a hard time moving the football when they needed to the most. And Ewers has not had a bad season. I mean, 26, 65, 25 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 66% completion percentage. And also, he's done it behind an offensive line that's been inconsistent. 1 week good, the next week bad, depending on the competition. We saw with Georgia, downright dreadful and trying to keep him right side up. But in both matches against Georgia, they had a hard time keeping Ewers right side up. But also, you think about this too is Ewers has to be the guy that they saw in 2023 when he was so good enough that he was on a college football video game, and his performance in the Big 12 championship. That's the Q Ewers that they need to show up in this game, and obviously everything pretty much sets on his shoulders. You think about this: the question marks as far as what his future holds. Is he transferring? Is he going pro? Is he going to stay in Texas one more year? On top of that, the calls for Arch Manning is getting louder and louder and louder. And with Texas being the home team, you will struggle early on. If he's not completing passes or things go sideways, the calls for Arch Manning is going to get even higher. And it's been pretty much known that Texas has struggled in the red zone as far as scoring points. I've read an article earlier this week that the suggestion was, how about put Arch Manning in the red zone, which it's only gonna make things worse when you're basically going substitute quarterback in and out during game situations. But Ewers is gonna have to be the guy. He's gonna have to be the quarterback and go out there and perform on the field. He has the home crowd for him if they get out to a good lead. But I mean, geez, if you're Quinn Ewers, after what happened in the SEC championship game and the calls for Arch Manning, you've been hearing for a couple of weeks. You've pretty much been hearing it all season, and then you got the question marks of whether or not you're going to stay or go. I mean, this could be his last game as a Texas Longhorn. So there's a lot of pressure on that kid's shoulders. He's going to have to come out. He's going to have to play poise. He's going to have to make sound decisions with the football. Don't force anything downfield. take what the defense give him, and he's just gonna have to bring his A game. I mean, that's pretty much what this comes down to. If which version of Ewers is gonna show up, is it gonna be the 2023 version that was one of the top quarterbacks in the nation, or is it gonna be the Ewers that we saw in the two matchups against Georgia and the kind of inconsistent playing times that has kind of left the door open for the Arch Manning calls to get louder and louder as the season has progressed.
Ewers was injured early in the year too, which is definitely a reason for Ewers' struggles. But I do think that there's been a lot of disappointing quarterbacks in the NCAA this year. Some of them you'll see in this playoff, but one of them is Quinn, and it's going to be very interesting to see how a team that was supposed to be based a lot of their offense has actually been holding it together defensively this entire season. So it'll be very interesting to see how this team plays in a lot of games that will be up against big time teams. And one of them is the Clemson Tigers. When you saw that the fifth highest conference champion would get the automatic 12 seed just skating into the playoff, who knew it would be one of the most successful programs of the last 10 years in the Clemson Tigers? Well, after a last second 56-yard field goal, after almost blowing a 24-7 halftime lead in a game where they got backdoored into in the first place because Miami lost on the second to last weekend of the year, Clemson's here. They're in Texas now. Clemson's first loss of the year and their last loss of the year were two SEC teams. Against Georgia, it was bad, and against South Carolina, it was closer. So, Jay, how did they beat this SEC team? Third time a charm?
It's going to come down to whether Clemson quarterback Cade Klubnik can outduel his Longhorns counterpart once again. I'll get to that at the end. By all rights, as the rabbi so nicely set me up for it, Clemson shouldn't be here. No one outside of the 29631 zip code thought they'd make the ACC title game as a 3-loss team, let alone get past SMU and into the CFP field of 12. And as you said, Rabbi, they needed that game-winning 56-yard field goal as time expired to complete that comeback from a 17-point deficit. But as I said in my preview of the ACC title game, Clemson's chances to get past the ACC's best team hinged on which version of quarterback Cade Klubnik showed up that night. And the one that showed up went 24 of 41, 58.5% completion for 262 yards, 6.4 per attempt, with 4 touchdowns, no picks, and 144.4 passer rating. Most of that damage happened in the first half. 3 of his 4 touchdown passes, including 2 of more than 30 yards, staked the Tigers to that 24-7 lead after the first 30 minutes. He'll have to do that for the full 60 minutes against a Texas Longhorn team that won the SEC in its first year in what's arguably the nation's toughest conference. Klubnik racked up the 12th most passing yards in the nation, and his 33 touchdowns were third against just 5 interceptions. He's shown an ability to move the ball efficiently and protect it under pressure, and his quick decision-making and ability to escape said pressure will be crucial against Texas's formidable defensive front. His mobility allows him to extend plays and deliver accurate throws under pressure, which gives Clemson a clear edge in critical moments. Add to it his ability to pick up chunk plays in the passing game, 28, 36, and 40-yard completions in the first half against South Carolina, for example, could cause problems for a Longhorn secondary that hasn't really been tested by as high-powered an offense as the Tigers, especially if Klubnik and wide receiver Bryant Wesco Jr. can replicate their 8 connections for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns that they had against SMU in the ACC title game. Clemson's ability to get big plays at the right time while not shooting themselves in the foot makes for an offense that could very well pull an upset in this 5 versus 12 matchup. The Tigers ranked 6th in the nation in turnover rate, just 1%, and 5th in interception rate at just 1.2%. 22nd in havoc rate allowed. That's a next-gen stat that measures the number of plays where the offense is disrupted by negative plays like an interception, fumble, or tackle for loss. Clemson's rate was just 13%. Clemson's formula of trying to make fewer mistakes than their opponent and make just the right number of plays at the end of a game gives them a chance in any game that they're in, including this one. Now, this is the first ever matchup between these two programs, but it's not the first time Cade Klubnik has faced off against Longhorns quarterback Quinn Ewers. In 2021, as high schoolers, they were on opposite sides in the Texas Class 6A state championship game when they were two of the highest rated recruits in the nation. Klubnik went 18 for 20. That's a 90% completion rate for 220 yards passing, 11 yards per attempt with a touchdown, no picks, along with 97 yards rushing as his Austin Westlake team beat Southlake Carroll that day 52-34 despite Ewers throwing for 351 yards and 3 touchdowns. I wouldn't bet against a repeat, not with the way Klubnik's been playing.
Going to be very interesting to watch that game. First of all, tilt the orange down on your television set when we get to that game. And second of all, going to be one of the only games I feel this weekend where the weather won't be a factor, which will be very interesting to see because, Texas is better this time of year than North. Okay, so the pundits don't usually get it right. That's what I've been told. Arizona State was favored in the Big 12 preseason poll. Favored to finish last. Over 6 times less likely, according to votes, to the preseason ranked number 1. That's Utah. Well, the fourth seeded the fourth seeded Sun Devils are here, and Cam Scadaboo is pretty much one of the biggest reasons why. If there was an extra week in the college football season, Cam Scadaboo would have been going to New York for the Heisman Trophy presentation. Wouldn't have won, but he finished 5th, and nobody has finished that high in the Heisman Trophy voting since Jake Plummer back in 1996. Scadaboo's season was amazing, and the best part of that is when the lights got bigger towards the end of the year and Arizona State got more national recognition, he became better. If you just take a look at the last few games of the season, 147 yards in a big matchup at home against BYU, 177 yards in a territorial game against Arizona, and then the piece de resistance in the Big 12 championship game, where he was named most outstanding player. 18 points, accounted for 3 touchdowns. That's the most that anybody had in the Big 12 championship game since 2008. Only 5 players have ever accounted for 150 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns in the Big 12 championship game. And the last person to do it before Scadaboo, a guy by the name of Adrian Peterson for Oklahoma back in 2004. Scadaboo has rushed this year for 1,500 yards and 500 receiving yards in the same season. The first ever FBS player to do it since McCaffrey in 2015. No Heisman winning running back ever did those numbers in the same season, and Scadaboo just did it nonchalantly right here. 200 plus scrimmage yards in 4 games this season, 22 total touchdowns, 140 first half yards in that game against Iowa State, and one of the most prolific seasons of any Sun Devil in history, and even just any running back. And the best part about this is, we were talking a little bit before about game situations and old games. Cam Scadaboo's last postseason game that he played was for FCS Sacramento State. And his last postseason game was a 66-63 loss in the FCS quarterfinals to Incarnate Word. And Incarnate Word's quarterback at that point was Cam Ward, the guy who finished 1 spot ahead of him in the Heisman voting that season. So that's how Arizona State is going to get their shit done when we get to the Chick-fil-A Bowl on New Year's Day. And they've been doubted a lot. They're going to be the underdogs, probably against both teams. I don't think they should be an underdog against Clemson, but I feel like they're going to get it. Just this whole entire season, they're first in the Big 12. They really were the party crashers. And just the amount that they won some of these games. They dominated BYU in the first half and then held on. In a weekend where rivals were just blown out in championship games and they took it the pedal to the metal pretty much in the beginning, and then they won by 26 in the Big 12 championship. Arizona State is dangerous here, and I would not be surprised to see them win that game when we get to Atlanta on January 1. It's going to be very interesting. I mean, that has a home field advantage, but who cares? Arizona State never thought that they would be here in any way, shape, or form at this moment, at this time. All right. If you were to tell me what would be the first ever interstate CFP game in what is now the 11 years of the CFP, would it be UCLA USC, Michigan State, Penn State Pitt? No, kids, it's the Battle of Indiana, as the 7th-seeded Fighting Irish will start the CFP itself on Friday, hosting the 10th-seeded Indiana Hoosiers. The Fighting Irish's second game of the season, kind of a nightmare, a 16-14 home loss to Northern Illinois, who finished their season 7-5. It's bad enough to lose to a MAC team, but to a mediocre MAC team at home? No thank you. But they've been flawless since, and despite only one victory not in double digits, the one-loss Irish are behind teams like Penn State and Texas. Jay, I know as a USC fan it's tough, but give the Irish their respect and give me a player for them to watch. Or give me just something for them to watch.
Okay, look, I mean, the Irish will win if Riley Leonard has a good game with his arm as well as his legs. Notre Dame finally has an offense that can complement their top flight defense. They're the only team in the nation ranked in the top 5 in both scoring offense, 39.8 points per game, number 3, and scoring defense, 13.6 points per game, also number 3, and one of only 4 schools ranked in the top 10 in yards per play on both sides of the ball. They're 6th on defense, allowing 4.5 yards per play, and they're 10th on offense, picking up 6.7 yards per play. The offense is built around their high-powered rushing attack, which is 10th in the nation at 224.8 yards per game and 2nd in the nation in yards per carry at 6.3. Running back Jeremiah Love leads the way, 949 yards rushing on just 134 carries. That's a 7.1 yards per carry with 15 rushing scores. Leonard is 2nd on the team with 721 yards on the ground and 14 TDs. The flip side of this offense is their passing attack, which is at the opposite end of the spectrum, ranking 101st, averaging just 196.4 yards per game, with Leonard, who is by no means an elite passer, and he only has 4 200-yard passing games this season, at the controls. The Hoosiers' run defense, number 1 in the nation in yards allowed, number 2 in yards per carry allowed, number 1 in 10-yard runs allowed, will be the toughest test for the Irish. And if Indiana gets the upper hand in that matchup, Notre Dame may have to do something it hasn't had to do all season, rely on Leonard's arm to win them a game, requiring him to put up a true dual threat performance. Yes, Leonard has grown as a quarterback since that brutal upset at the hands of Northern Illinois back in September, where he was 20 of 32, 62.5% completion for just 163 yards, just 5.1 yards per attempt, with no scores and 2 picks and just a 98.2 passer rating. Not to mention, he only had 16 yards rushing on 11 carries. That's 1.5 yards per carry, though he did get a touchdown. He has accounted for 30 total touchdowns this season, leading the most prolific offense in modern Notre Dame school history. But his passing resume does not strike fear in defenses. He's the 48th ranked quarterback in terms of passer rating, 140.8. His 2,092 yards passing ranks 87th. His 174.3 yards per game ranks 95th. His 7.1 yards per attempt ranks 79th. His 16 touchdown passes ranks 68th. Granted, his 66.2% completion percentage does rank 22nd, but that's on a small sample size as he averages just 24.4 attempts per game, which is 77th. He's yet to throw for 250 yards in a game this season. In fact, he hasn't topped 250 yards passing in a game since the 2022 season when he was at Duke, where he did it 5 times, topping 300 yards passing 3 times. His single game high this season, 229 in the win over Stanford back in October, which was his first of only 2 games where his passer rating topped 200. Now, despite being in the same state and separated by roughly a 3-hour drive, Indiana and Notre Dame haven't played since 1991. The last 6 meetings were all in South Bend, and Notre Dame won all of them by at least 18 points. Indiana's last win against the Irish came in 1950, which was also the last time the teams met in Bloomington. But as we've seen, this year's Indiana ain't your granddad's Indiana or even your dad's. They are formidable on both sides of the ball, and their quarterback, Curtis Rourke, is number 1 in the nation in passer rating at 181.4 and tops in the conference in yards per attempt at 9.9. On paper, Indiana has the edge if it comes down to winning the game through the air. The Hoosiers may be the best team the Irish have faced all season, and they cannot be a one-dimensional offense despite how formidable that one dimension is. Riley Leonard may need to channel his inner Blue Devil to get the Irish past their in-state rival. Can he pull it off? How he answers that question may determine how far the Irish go this postseason.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that game, the resale ticket prices for that game are like through the roof. Now the others all right, but it's kind of funny because with a lot of these colleges, a lot of these people a lot of the students are home for the semester. Indiana is all going to be in South Bend on Friday. It is probably one of the biggest games in Indiana college history, and we're not talking Hoosiers here basketball. We're talking some good old-fashioned football. A night game at South Bend on a Friday night, not broadcast by NBC. We really have. First time that's going to happen, by the way, since 1990. All right, Anthony. The 10th seeded Hoosiers had their nightmare in the second to last game of the season as a 38-15 loss to Ohio State. Wasn't exactly the prove-it game that they were looking for. But like Notre Dame, in the rest of their wins, only one is by single digits. Again, there's that pesky Michigan. Like Notre Dame, they might take offense with their ranking, but both coaches, Freeman and the guy from Indiana, from James Madison, I forget his name because I didn't do it, but they both got contract extensions in the last month, and if you don't know them, just Google them, like the Indiana coach says. So, Anthony, you have the Google. You've Googled the keys to an Indiana upset. Give them to me.
Oh, but if you're in Indiana, you have to embrace
Kurt Signetti, by the way. I can't believe I completely blanked on his name.
Look, if you're in Indiana, you have to embrace the underdog role in this. I mean, you think about this. They have the tools for the upset. They're going to South Bend. They're the first team. They're going to actually play in the first round playoff game in 24 hours. But on top of that, we get it. We've heard everything about the Indiana Hoosiers. They don't have a quality win to speak of. They're only the one time they stepped up in competition, they got thumped by Ohio State. We've heard everything. We've heard the ESPN down even suggest they bench the quarterback to secure playoff seeding. Yes, I know. One of the worst hot takes ever in a culture full of bad hot takes. I get all that. But if you're the Hoosiers, you gotta embrace this underdog role. I mean, you got one of the best offenses in the country. You got Curtis Rourke, one of the top quarterbacks, a transfer, leading the way. 70% completion percentage, 28-27 through the air, 27 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. You got Justice Ellison on the ground, control the ground game, close over 800 yards to kind of complement that passing offense. You got a defense led by Michaela Kamara with 10 sacks, 15 tackles for loss that is fired up, ready to go. But more importantly, they are really stout at stopping the run, which is Notre Dame's bread and butter on offense. And then you think about this, Indiana doesn't turn the ball over. They are a high power but precision passing offense that play up tempo, that will speed the game up. They will keep the offense going. And more importantly, when they do that, you keep a tight defense on the field a little more than they want to be on the field. That's going to be one of the major keys there. The Hoosiers defense, as far as the run, has not allowed more than 137 yards on the ground all season. They only gave up more than 100 yards 4 times this season total. So on both sides of the football, the Hoosiers are built for probably, if there was going to be an upset in any of these games this weekend, this is the game you probably circle because of the in-state rivalry. The fact that Indiana is going to be a pseudo home team, only traveling 3 hours to South Bend, Indiana, and the fact that they are the team that everyone's kind of overlooking. Yes, and Jay mentioned earlier with Clemson, maybe not deserving to be there, but you think about that. You get in on a 56-yard field goal in college with those wide hash marks, you kind of deserve to get in there. Indiana has not beaten a team that we can look at in the schedule and say, that's a good quality win. But neither is Notre Dame. I mean, they haven't exactly beaten up the creme de creme as far as offensive firepower and their respective schedule as well. And Rabbi, you and I talked about this earlier this week. You said that Notre Dame's secondary is kind of suspect, and
Yes.
Indiana early on, you want to test this secondary out because they have not gone against a very any kind of offensive firepower to say the least. You want to go at them almost immediately. Don't be surprised if the first play of the game is a play that's shot downfield for a big play. I mean, and that's just to even dip your toe in the water to see just how good this Fighting Irish secondary really is. If you can get those one-on-one matchups downfield, but more importantly, you have an offense and a quarterback in Rourke who just don't make mistakes and turn the ball over, and that's going to be very hard for the Fighting Irish if they can't force those mistakes and kind of get extra possessions in, particularly if their running game struggles and now they have to rely on a passing attack that reminds you more of the Chicago Bears offense as far as passing than anything else.
2024, yes, definitely 2024.
So Indiana. So Indiana, I mean, the apple is right there for the taking. They just gotta be able to just go out there and say, "Hey, we're here. Let's go out there, play with house money, and let the chips fall where they may."
And I was saying the secondary, the one game that kind of showed for me that Notre Dame is still suspect is the game against USC, where USC could do a lot. And if they had a more accurate quarterback, they probably upset Notre Dame. I don't know if they would agree with me in that. There were a lot of games that Notre Dame had that were suspect in terms of defending the pass. So we'll see what happens. Okay. Second seeded Georgia Bulldogs await the winner. And for a team who was preseason ranked number 1 looking for a third CFP in 4 years, might have thought, hey, second, that's a conclusion I can come up with. You didn't think it would be with 2 losses and 5 other wins by 2 possessions or less. Good Lord. Well, I'm going to get to the quarterback situation in a second because it's big. But the player to watch is on the defensive end, and that's Jalen Walker. He won the Butkus Award this year as a junior. He will probably be an eventual Philadelphia Eagle in the draft, or at least in free agency sometimes, considering their propensity for Georgia players. He is the game's top linebacker. 57 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries. And the Longhorns don't ever want to see him again. He had 7 tackles and 3 sacks in the first half. Of the game that the Bulldogs won in Texas at 30-15, and then another guarded variety, 3 tackles for loss and 1 sack in the overtime game, in the SEC championship game. Texas sees Javon Walker in their nightmares, and it's not a pretty sight. Javon Walker has had a pretty damn good year for himself. There is no game where he didn't have multiple tackles. He has a lot of tackles for loss. Again, the sacks are low, but he is an impact player, and you have to take a look at where he is on the field at all times. Georgia relies on their defense. There are reasons for that, as we will talk about right now. They have a quarterback who has not started a game. I mean, it was mentioned today that Carson Beck is exploring surgery options to repair an injury to his elbow on his throwing arm. So there is a very likely scenario that Beck is not going to be playing in the Sugar Bowl come New Year's Day. That means Gunnar Stockton is going to make his first start in a college football playoff quarterfinal matchup. That's not great, but he did come off the bench in a 6-3, having a 6-3 deficit in the SEC title game. 12 of 16, 71 yards, 1 interception. Now, Beck had a campaign that was inconsistent. A lot of drops by his wide receivers. This is probably one of the worst offensive years Georgia's had in a while. He was the number 5 dual threat quarterback prospect in the country in 2022. The strengths are different. He will provide a little more mobility, and it'll be very interesting to see. Now, the CFP has had a history with backup quarterbacks. If you remember, Ohio State, the first national champion, went to the 3rd string, Cardell Jones, who played better than his regular player, the man he backed up, JT Barrett, in terms of winning a national title in 2014-15. And then the history that Georgia has just had against backup quarterbacks themselves, both involving Alabama. If you remember the 2018 national title game, the 17-18 national title game, they had to deal with a new quarterback in the second half. That wasn't involved with injury. That was just because Jalen Hurts was performing badly. And Tua Tagovailoa came in and beat them pretty soundly. And then in the SEC championship that following season, they had the inverse happen as Jalen Hurts came in for Tua and led them to an SEC championship, which kept Georgia out of the CFP. Maybe the shoe's going to be on the other foot this time, guys, and Georgia's going to actually get big backup quarterback play to help what is by far their biggest inefficiency this season, and that's their defense. Luckily, the two teams that they're playing, they're going to have a better advantage, at least on defense, against both of those teams. So Notre Dame and Georgia is a good matchup for Georgia, and Indiana and Georgia is a good matchup for Georgia. But this is the first time we've seen the CFP happen. Those teams might have momentum, and Georgia will not have played for 3 weeks, so anything can really happen. But Georgia is definitely not the overwhelming favorite we thought going into the season.
Nope.
For the 6th-seeded Penn State Nittany Lions, I've got good news and bad news for them. The good news is their first ever CFP berth and a decent path at 2 playoff wins. I said it during the season. All they had to do was not stub their toe and they would get into the CFP playoff, and they did. The bad news for their fans, well, we're playing at noon again. It's all Fox's fault. After the 11th-seeded SMU Mustangs got the lifeline of an at-large after losing the ACC title game, you can play this game at 4 a.m. for all they care. They're in. As is the MO for Penn State, we'll start with them. They won all of their games that they were supposed to win and lost the 2 that they were supposed to lose. November lost to Ohio State, where they only managed 270 yards of offense and scored 13 points. And then a Big Ten title game loss to Oregon. They led up 466 yards and 45 points. Anthony, Penn State needs to stand up in a big spot here. Give me the.
Hey, look, if you're Penn State, consider what the forecast going to be this weekend. Playing a day game at high noon is such a bad idea. But at least you're playing the sun for that matter. But, yeah, the defense has got a rebound. We saw it in the Big Ten championship game. They got torched by the high-power Oregon Ducks offense, without question. Season high 466 yards, 24 first downs. There was 2 personal foul penalties the first half. Dylan Gabriel just had his way with the secondary. Ted Johnson, pretty much the connection to Ted Johnson was unstoppable that night. Combined for 181 yards and a score. Gabriel finished with 4 touchdown passes overall. Now, obviously, Jay, you and I are offensive guys. So we played on the offense, but we know the defense is a proud bunch and a proud unit that doesn't like to have their faces rubbed in the dirt all that much. But that's what happened a few weeks ago. And now they're going up against SMU. The Mustangs coming in with the 6th best offense in the nation. It's pretty much a list of things they have to check off as far as winning this game. You have to be wary of Kevin Jennings, the quarterback, a guy who threw for over 3,000 yards and 22 touchdowns, but is a quarterback who can scramble, who can make plays with his legs as well. So keeping him in the pocket, keeping him under some kind of control is going to be one of the key things. Also, taking away some of the multiple threats. Now here's the thing: the Mustangs are number 6 offensively, but do not have a receiver over 1,000 yards. In fact, Robert Daniels actually leads the team in receiving yards with 599 receiving yards, which tells you how they've done a good job of spreading the ball and spreading the wealth as far as getting that offensive going. But Penn State, what they need to do is, because there is no real go-to guy offensively, you have to be able to take away any big plays downfield. And when you go against an offense that spreads the ball around the way the Mustangs do, that is always a considerable threat. I mean, because there is no real 1A receiver you feel like you got a double team or take away as far as the game plan is concerned. But Sean Smith, the running back for the Mustangs, is also someone that they're going to have to slow down. Smith ran for 1,270 yards, 14 touchdowns. And Penn State, their biggest strength has been the front 4 defensively. So being able to really slow down the Mustangs, and also plays the home field advantage. I mean, you're at home. Yes, it's a yeah. Why don't you want about playing at high noon? But when you're in the playoff, you play at 3 a.m. if you need to. But this is one of those situations where the Penn State defense may have to go out and really win this football game and set the tone early on, by getting a couple of 3 and out stops and being able to maybe force a turnover or two and really get the crowd at Happy Valley going. And Coach Franklin, let's be honest, he's done a great job at turning this program around after everything that happened with the controversy a decade ago. But it's time for him to start winning some big games and stepping up in a tremendous way. They couldn't do it in the Big Ten Championship game. Now this is a week for redemption for Penn State. And the Nittany Lions, it is a game that the defense is going to have to show up and show out. This is the game they're going to have to do it. And the Mustangs, while they're not the Oregon Ducks, so that's not Dylan Gabriel on the other side of football, they're still a challenge offensively that can go into Happy Valley and pull an upset, especially if the Nittany Lions offense, go into typical Penn State offensive mode where they're suddenly struggling and can't score points. Then we saw how good they can be and trying to rally back against Oregon, but they're going to have to need their defense to really rebound and get back to how good they were all season in order to win this football game.
Maybe they need one of those Keegan-Michael Key special warm-up speeches, considering how much he looks like James Franklin.
You know what? They should
get them going in there.
I don't know if you ever seen the clip of him impersonating Coach Franklin and running on the field during one spring practice. I think they should really bring him back to lead them out onto the field. I mean, that run was just incredible, and his impersonation is just spot on. I mean, he's a Penn State alumni, but I think it would just be great to bring him back to this game. I mean, why not? I mean, come on. It's the playoffs. You got a home game.
It's better than
everything is set up for Penn State to kind of take that next step that's going into the next round.
It is,
but
yeah.
That's a sleeper. But I'll set you up, Jay, with this one. You don't want to sleep on SMU. I mean, this is a team they're in. They're happy. They're not just there to be happy. They're there to put on a show and then show why they're in the college football playoff in the first place.
Speaking of Jay.
Yeah.
Let me just set you up again myself too, just because I like what I wrote. After kind of getting screwed out of a New Year's Six bowl, the SMU Mustangs got that aforementioned lifeline. The committee deciding that a flawless ACC regular season and 2 losses to BYU and Clemson by a combined 6 points, that's enough, rightfully may I add, for a CFP bid. Jay, there's some Mustangs in the city of Happy Valley, and they're calling me out, and they're calling Penn State out. How does SMU get out with the upset?
It basically they'll win if quarterback Kevin Jennings plays more like he did in the second half of the ACC title game. In my ACC title game preview on our last show, I talked about how much better SMU became after Kevin Jennings took over as the full-time starter at quarterback. His ability to beat teams with both his arm and his legs, as Anthony alluded to, were one of the biggest reasons the Mustangs went undefeated in their first season in the ACC and made the conference championship game against the Clemson Tigers. And if SMU is to hand Penn State yet another loss to a top 10 team, James Franklin is 3-19 against the AP top 10 since 2014, a dizzying statistic that Penn State fans and alums know way too much about. It'll likely need to require a performance similar to what Jennings did against Clemson when he put up his 300-yard passing game and tossed a trio of second-half touchdown passes to bring the Mustangs back from a 17-point deficit entering the fourth quarter to tie the game with 20 seconds left before losing it on that 56-yard field goal as time expired. One of the keys for the Mustangs offense will be to play at a fast pace. They'll need to dictate tempo against the Penn State defense. And they'll need Jennings and company to land on the plus side of things with the high variance risk reward strategy that head coach Rhett Lashley employs. The Mustangs throw deep more than the average team, especially against man coverage, and they gain 20 plus yards on 8% of their snaps, as 21st nationally. And in Jennings, they have one of the more high variance quarterbacks in college football. Yeah, he ranks 9th in yards per dropback, 8.3, and 24th in yards per completion, 13.4. And yes, he's great at escaping a collapsing pocket and making plays with his legs. But he will also throw the ill-advised pass that leads to an interception. He has 7 in his last 7 games. Speaking of turnovers, they are often a deciding factor, especially in big games like this matchup. And with SMU this season, that's been very true. In their 2 losses, the Mustangs had 2 interceptions by Jennings and they lost 3 fumbles. Overall, though, SMU has fumbled 23 times this season, losing 12, but turnovers have not hurt them. Despite giving the ball away 21 times, they've also forced 21 turnovers, which is a net difference of 0. And SMU's opponents have only managed to score just 17 points off those 21 turnovers. Overall, Jennings has been efficient with his arm, 66% completion percentage, 8.9 yards per attempt, and effective with his legs, 29.2 yards rushing per game. And with him at the controls, the Mustangs' up-tempo offense has racked up 501 points this season, 6th most in the nation. For SMU to have a chance against Penn State, if he can't replicate the ACC title game performance, then I think he needs to replicate his performance in the Mustangs' 34-27 win over Louisville back in week 6, where he went 21 of 27 passing, that's 77.8% completion, 281 yards in the air, 10.4 yards per attempt. Didn't have any touchdowns, didn't have a pick either, and he posted a 165.2 passer rating, and he was a true dual threat, adding 113 yards rushing on the ground, 113 yards rushing on 10 carries. It's 11.3 yards per carry with a touchdown. SMU, as you guys said, is basically playing with house money at this point. The pressure is all on Penn State. Happy Valley will likely be in full whiteout mode, and with the game time temperature expected to be in the upper 20s, Beaver Stadium will be a tough environment to play in for the Mustangs, whose most hostile road experience previously this season was Louisville, and they won. But if ace edge rusher Abdul Carter and the Nittany Lions defense can't keep Jennings, who ranked 2nd in D1 in passer efficiency when pressured at 156.4, in check, that record against AP top 10 teams is going to drop to 3-20.
I hate to correct you, Jay. They are technically number 12 in the current AP poll. They were 8. No. Did they
when the week 15 rankings came out, they were 10.
They were 8, but the final one technically does have them at 12. So, but again, that's really semantics when you come in both spots here.
And yet you felt compelled to correct me.
Absolutely. I just wanted to make people be very fair that it's they're still a pretty damn good team. It's going to be interesting on Saturday. Boise State is also, I think, ranked in the top 10. I think they're number 10. Good for number 8. They're number 8, actually. But they're the Mountain West champs. They have one damn loss on their resume this entire year. And it was 4 months ago, almost 4 months ago, to an Oregon team at Oregon, and they lost by a field goal. They're for real. Now, we can do all the research that we want, and we can go into all the X's and O's and everything. But for God's sakes, the man even said it. Ashton Jeanty, the running back for Boise State, all they do is they have one job and one thing to plan for, and they still can't stop me. Nope. And yeah, nobody can stop Ashton Jeanty. This is a season where he did not win the Heisman. He was a big underdog going into the Heisman, and what ended up was the closest race for the Heisman in 15 years, ironically enough. 2 non-quarterbacks were involved in that too, and Mark Ingram of Alabama and Toby Gerhardt of Stanford. 2,497 yards, 29 touchdowns on the ground, 116 yards and a score on 20 receptions. They're the number 3 seed in the playoff for a reason. There's going to be many things to look for when Jeanty plays on New Year's Eve against the winner of this matchup. First of all, the stat of they need only just 120 and 132 yards to get himself to the record of Barry Sanders. Remember, regular season stats and bowl games count for your stats, so this would be part of the season. Even though Sanders did 11 games and Jeanty did it in 14, the stat still stands. But the man's only reached that number, has reached the number of what he does per game. He averages 192.1 per game He's only failed to reach that 132 I mentioned twice. And one of those games was a game against Portland State, where he only had to rush the ball 11 yards because, Portland State. Boise State has just been outstanding this year, and it's all because of Genty.
Yep.
His numbers for his career, almost 4,600 yards altogether, 50 rushing touchdowns, and he can pretty much do it all. His numbers have been consistent almost the entire year, as we mentioned on the last show, because it was going on, the Mountain West Championship was going on while we were on. It was 209 yards in that game and 1 touchdown. The numbers are just video games. Scored 6 touchdowns in the opener against Georgia Southern, 4 touchdowns against Washington State, 3 touchdowns against Oregon. It just could not be said that there is no player in this college football playoff, and Travis Hunter is not playing, so all you Travis Hunter fans, do not send your hate mail, that is more dominant and more efficient than Ashton Genty. He's going to get to show his stuff in a big stage, in a probably very pro-Boise State crowd come December 31st against the winner of this game. They'll be playing at the Fiesta Bowl, by the way, in Glendale, Arizona. And I'm very excited to see the Genty show make its way to possibly an upset over either Penn State, or wouldn't be really an upset over SMU. Honestly, I don't think it'd be an upset over either of those teams. But this Boise State team is the team that you need to watch out for, and they're very dangerous. I would not be surprised to see them in the college football playoff semifinals.
And by the way, what's cool about this with Boise State? That there's a lot of fans that probably haven't really watched Boise State this season because of the conference they play in, the fact that
the time zone too. A lot of their games are going to be late at night.
They don't get many national televised games. I would say tune in, just for Genty alone. You're going to be for a treat. This guy is a special talent. During the last show, we were literally watching this kid kind of rip it up on the field. Mm-hmm. It's going to be great to watch. Like I said, I'm looking forward to this weekend. It's going to be cold. I have 0 reasons to go outdoors and to socialize with anybody as far as humanity is concerned. So I'm super going to be locked in and looking and watching wall-to-wall football all weekend.
Hey, it'll be a nice way for me to start my year-end vacation, boys. I'm looking forward to it as well.
Yep. I got my flat plane too.
I wish Jay could say he's going to watch a lot of the Texas Clemson game, but it's going on at the same time as the Steelers game, so I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, that's
unless you put it on tape delay.
That's what the second screen is for, Rabbi. You know how we roll.
Yeah, second screen is going to be focused a lot more on the events going on in Baltimore, but there's so much stuff going on.
The first screen will be focused on what's going on in Baltimore.
I mean, yes, the first screen is going to be in Baltimore. The second screen, though, is supposed to. Okay. Now we must address the $765 million elephant in the room as we finish tonight with baseball. Amen. It was almost 2 weeks ago when the baseball world, specifically the New York baseball world, saw now former Yankees outfielder and the man who finished third for MVP and Juan Soto getting a, $765 million 15-year contract with the crosstown New York Mets. I still can't believe I'm saying those numbers.
Yep,
even if he deserves it or not. As Juan Soto now enjoys the blue and orange and still tries to learn the words to OMG this very day. Luis Iglesias, by the way, not signed yet, so that OMG might be gone. He now has the largest contract in sports history. Since you're wearing the Mets beanie, Anthony, you have the Mets fan response to pulling off Uncle Steve's biggest fish to date.
Stunning. And I say this because...
Yeah.
I say this because, I'll say this, I speak for myself. I didn't expect Juan Soto to leave the Yankees, and he didn't have much of a reason to do so. I mean, you're coming off a season when you hit a career high 41 home runs, a 288 batting average, and you just appeared in the World Series. And you was pretty much the hero of the American League Championship. Hell, you hit the home run that sent the Yankees into the fall class for the first time since 2009. And look, money talks. I think this is a reminder that baseball is a business, okay? And let's not. And I hate to. I don't want to be that fan because obviously you guys are the resident Yankee fans still.
No, this is
But
a way for you to be that fan right now in this segment. So this is the
right.
right
you,
way to do it.
you
But I have to
take your
remind,
victory lap here, Ant. Go ahead.
no, I have to remind Yankee fans, and let me take this hat off because it's pretty hot. But $260 million that the Yankees offer, that's not exactly cheap, okay? You just gave $212 million to match free. So let's not act like
We'll
the
talk about that in a
Yankees,
second.
yeah, the Yankees that the Juan Soto just went for the money. I mean, look, the Yankees did what they tried to do to keep him. But this is look, a franchise altering moment for a team that's always been second fiddle in the city of New York. Let's just be honest. Since 1990, I want to go back to 1993. The Yankees have not had a losing season since 1992. The Mets has had 18 seasons when they finished below 500. The Yankees have made 25 playoff appearances. The Mets, 7 in that time frame. Only 4 times have the Mets actually finished with a better record than the Yankees. And even then, the Yankees still finished over 500. So it's almost, and look, and I have to remind you too, these are the New York Yankees. And the Yankees are one of the things that they're synonymous for winning, and the fact that because George Steinbrenner was the owner for so many years, if he wanted someone, he was going to get them. Whether it was Reggie Jackson way back when, whether it was, remember 2000, the free agency in 2009, you got Martez Sherman, AJ Burnett, and CeCe Sabathia all in the same offseason. That was literally the top 3 free agents in baseball. And yeah, and they contribute. That was $500 million spent, and it was worth it. Because by October 2009, November 2009, November 4th to be exact, you were world champions once again. So I would say that money was well spent. But you gotta keep this in mind too for the Mets. This is a team that is riding momentum. I mean, you had a team that was projected to finish maybe third in the division, hell, even fourth behind Miami, because everybody thought Miami would be better than what they turned out to be. And it was just after the All-Star break, how this team turned it around from an 0-5 start to. And I was at the game where they almost got no hit by the Atlanta Braves on a Saturday afternoon. And if it wasn't for JD Martinez knifing a home run with 2 outs, that probably been one of the lower points besides being 0-5. And you see, and then to go from that to the wild stretch run to getting into the playoffs in the final doubleheader of the regular season, and the beating the Philadelphia Phillies in the division series, the dramatics of coming back from against Milwaukee in the wild card, Pete Alonso, who was still a free agent by the way, and his dramatic 2-run home run. This is a team that gave a fan base that really didn't have a reason to be hopeful. Even 2 years ago in 2022, when they finished with 97 wins, but when they finished with a great record, but you blew the division in the final weekend of the season, this was like the total opposite. And even losing to the Dodgers in the National League Championship Series, it was like, for the first time as a Met fan, there was a sense of optimism going into a new season and to see what will happen next. And this is the Wilpons. And this is the reminder that we got, and the fact that the Mets have an owner who was going to spend money. And that was something that, as a Mets fan for so many years, we wanted, we begged for so many years. From 2012 to 2019, the Mets never had a top 10 payroll. They've had the highest payroll in baseball each of the last 2 seasons. So, granted, 2023 did not work out, but even then, there was a silver lining. Moving Matt Surgeon and Justin Verlander allowed the Mets to get draft pick back and replenish their farm system. And that was a big thing. And I'm quite sure that was a selling point as far as Juan Soto coming to Flushing. And also, he's played there for so many times as a member of the Washington Nationals. So City
and
Field,
it's had a very good batting average, by the way. He's a very good City Field hitter.
Yeah, and by the way, I know City Field don't exactly have the Yankee Stadium right for a porch, But that right field line going to the Coca-Cola corner is very tempting for a left-handed hitter. If there was any power alley, and I would know because I pretty much live in City Field, right field down that line is power alley city for left-handers, and we've seen home runs just leave that ballpark, particularly when the weather gets more hot. But as far as debate on the field, you got Francisco Lindor aside long term. You have like your 1-2 guy right there. You still got Brandon Inman for a couple more seasons, and this lineup, and he's joining a lineup that finished seventh offensively in runs scored. And this was considering they could score any runs to start the season through the first couple of months. And now, if you're a Mets fan, you would like to see Pete Alonso come back because I think that pretty much will solidify this lineup. But as far as the organization, so being a fan, you see ticket sales is going up. As far as the single game tickets for the Mets this season, I don't know if you saw my IG post. I've already kind of locked down my first weekend at City Field when the season starts. Don't worry, I'm going to a couple of Yankee games this season too. Look, I'm a New Yorker.
Of course, we understand.
I'm a Met fan, but I'm a New Yorker at heart, so I don't really hate the Yankees. I just want to see my team succeed as well. But for the Mets, it is a franchise turning point when you realize that they have a franchise player that they're going to have for maybe the next 10, 15 years. There was an opt-out after year 5, but then that contract then goes up to $800 million. If the Mets decide to want to fight and hold on to Juan Soto. But even then, it's because it actually have to DH now full time that you just see Juan Soto be productive, even if he is halfway through that contract and decide to make him a DH. So I think it's a big moment for the Mets franchise. On top of the fact that they're going into next season, has a team to kind of look out for because they kind of snuck up on everybody this year and had that great postseason run. But I'll tell you what, May was 17th to the 19th at Yankee Stadium is going to be must-see TV. I'm quite sure Major League Baseball is going to go out of their way to make those games at Yankee Stadium on a nationally televised game. And look, the Yankees are fine, and I'll say this, they're fine. I like Rabbi J, you're going to get into more. I like what they've done with their free agency. I don't even call that a plan B. I think that's called more okay, we'll turn the page and we're still the Yankees. But for the Mets, pivot. Yeah, but for the Mets, it is kind of okay, now we're not little brother anymore because we have an owner that will actually spend money, kind of like the way we watched George Steinbrenner, and which is why he was beloved by Yankee fans. He wanted to win at all costs. And that was why I tell the young Yankee fans, why he was so endearing. And yeah, he had his dark moments with the Dave Winfield situation, but that's what made George Steinbrenner who he was, even going back to the 70s. He wanted to win, and now to see the Mets do it.
Before this gets a little bit off topic,
I
kind of want to go back to something that you just said that'll bring up my first point as a Yankee reaction. I'm not the typical Yankee fan out there. I can criticize this team as much as the next person. I understand being a fan as a fan. Little brother is an interesting comment that you say because that's something I've seen all the time. It's like I just think of them as now a team. The Mets is now a team that is spending proportionately to the city that they're in. Agreed. Because if you have no salary cap, you should have moves made like this. Are they done responsibly? That's what they're here to do. But I think the Juan Soto move is definitely one of those moves. They've done that before. They did it with Lindor a few years ago. But I think this is the real signification that this is they're two New York teams here. It's not big brother, little brother. All those scenarios can come in. The Mets have not won the city. All those scenarios can come in. The Mets are playing in the NL and the Yankees are playing in the AL. Yes, there's this whole entire rivalry, but what came down to the end of the day for Juan Soto is the almighty dollar. And I didn't think of that beforehand. I looked at it and I'm like, it's a little bit different in terms of money. It's not like the biggest thing in the world. But when I looked, I remember 5 years ago, Juan Soto was offered the richest contract in baseball history by the Nationals. It was for 15 years and $440 million. And Juan Soto, whether it was because he did not want to be a National for the rest of his career, I don't blame him, although they did win the World Series that year, said, hell no. And it turned out that he made the gamble for that 5 years later. He becomes the richest player in baseball history. Deferred money, he ain't doing that. But Juan Soto is a guy who was going to go with whoever made him the biggest offer and whoever was going to lift themselves over. Now, the Juan Soto sweepstakes, it's just interesting how it all happened because of the fact that, according to many people who were at the winter meetings when this was expected to go down, and it did, the Yankees were the leaders of the clubhouse for Soto at 3 o'clock. And by the time that the beat reporter had dinner, the Mets were the favorites. That's what this was. This is basically a game of Mario Kart where you went in and out, and eventually the Yankees were the team that slipped on the banana peel. But that's only figuratively because they bounced back quickly. I think the Yankees, I know, Jay, you had said beforehand, and I'll let you get to it in a second, that this was a non-starter. You sign Juan Soto and you do it. Get the checkbook. They did as much as they could with the checkbook, considering. And what they had to do is pivot and go to Plan B. Now, Plan B is not done yet. Plan B, I think, is going to need to involve a lot more on the offensive side of the ball, which we'll get to in a second. But what they've done on the defensive side of the ball is pretty big. Having the money now freed up with the Soto, with not having to spend on Soto, allowed them to make an extra commitment to Max Fried, giving him an 8-year, and he ended up signing a nice little 8-year, $218 million deal that allows one of the league's most consistent pitchers, a guy who has an ever-rotating lineup. I don't know if he has a best pitch because he has multiple pitches in his arsenal.
I'll get into it. Don't steal all.
I'm not going anymore. I'm not going anymore into that. But it's just hilarious just to see that. I mean, a lot of teams, but the Yankees were willing to give that 8th year. They're willing to risk what they're going to get in the back end of a deal if they'll have a 36 to 39 year to get what they do in 31 through 35 years for their ages for Max Fried. Then the Devin Williams contract came, and that allowed them to move Nestor Cortez, and then Caleb Durden, and my favorite name of the whole entire show, cash, considerations, cash. And it turned out it's a very interesting move. I like the move for many reasons, and we'll get to obviously the stats of it in a second. I wonder what it does for Luke Weaver. Can I at least say what I think as a fan and not act like an idiot when I'm talking? Thank you. But I'm very curious what else to do to Luke Weaver. That's funny. Finally, Cody Bellinger, the biggest deal of it, and he got him for basically nothing. Cody Poteet, moving on there, and again, considerations, cash going over to the Cubs. Now, I'll get to the statistics in a moment with Cody Bellinger, what I assume you're going to get to, Jay. But it's just hilarious.
Cody Bellinger's all yours, dude. I'm sticking straight.
I'll take it. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I'm sticking.
What you do with Cody Bellinger is you get a former MVP from 2019. And that he wasn't the right since, but he was 305, 47 home runs, 115 RBIs. Those numbers went significantly down post-COVID to hitting 165 in 2021. But when he went back to the Cubs, the first season, he was hitting almost back to what he was back in 2019, 26 home runs, 97 RBIs. He went down in average this year to 266. But what you get at Cody Bellinger is two things. One, power, and that porch in right field that everyone's going to talk about. He can take the most advantage of that right field porch specifically. Number two, flexibility. The fact that he can play center field, the fact that he can play first base. I hope he plays center because I feel like he plays a good enough center. And at the age that he's at, which is still in his 30s, is going to have his age 30 season this year. I think what you can do with Cody in the lineup is phenomenal. I want to see more, though. I need to see more from what they get in this lineup because I'm worried about two things going forward. Number one, the immediate. A lineup last year minus Judge or without Judge was horrible in the regular season, and we'll get to those numbers in a second. It was not good. Most importantly, though, you need people in the postseason. So Stanton was one of those people who had a great postseason. Judge was not, and Judge not being like a guy that you really, really have to depend on, you just want to really have to depend on him. But seeing Cody Bellinger in New York is happy because it reminds me of the days of Clay Bellinger, who was at Yankee for 3 seasons from 1999 to 2001. Clay was a two-time World Series champion, and he is now, Cody, the fourth son of a Yankee to join the ball club. If you don't know the rest, Dale Berra is number one. You know who his father is. Deja vu all over again in Yogi Berra. Mark Leiter Jr., his father, Mark Leiter, was a pitcher for the Yankees in 1990. And Ike Davis, whose father, Ron, was at the Yankees in
Oh, I didn't know
1978
that.
to 1981.
Did
Yep,
not
and
know that.
Ike Davis was a Yankee his final year in 2016. Yankees are making moves, and this isn't incomplete because this is still going on. And Jay, I'll leave it to you for the last part of this. What does losing Soto mean? And what does the pivot mean for the future?
Yeah, it took a minute, to process it all, but once it became official that Soto would be taking the 4 train from 161st and River into Grand Central, switching to the 7, and taking that all the way out to Mets Willets Point, this is where I landed. I think there was always a part of me that knew that Soto was likely to be a 1-year rental. Soto has always been upfront with what he wanted, and that was to have the largest contract with the highest annual average value. And that's what the Mets gave him. I did the math. He's been chasing this contract since he turned down, as you guys said, the Nats' 15-year, $440 million offer. That's an amount that actually nearly matched the $450 million that the Lerner family paid to buy the Nationals from MLB in '06. Him turning that down forced them to trade him to the Padres back in 2022. The bidding was always going to come down to the Yankees and the Mets, and no one can outspend Steve Cohen when he decides he really wants a particular player. Not even the Steinbrenners, though Hal went as far as he could, offering Soto a 16-year deal worth $760 million, according to Major League Baseball sources. Yeah, it hurts to lose a generational player like Soto. The Ted Williams 2.0 comparisons are not a stretch. But in the spirit of the season, I'm going to try a little goodwill towards men and thank him for helping to deliver AL pennant number 41 and wish him well on the other side of the Whitestone Bridge. Hey, better the Mets than the effing Red Sox. You know what I'm saying, guys? As far as the pivot, I like what the Yankees' initial response was to losing Soto. If you believe that you're going to have issues scoring runs, beef up the unit that's tasked with preventing them. Signing former Atlanta Braves ace Max Fried to that 8-year, $218 million deal, the most lucrative ever for a left-handed pitcher and the 4th largest pitching contract overall ever, was the first move, and it automatically boosts the Yankees starting rotation and made Nestor Cortez expendable. More on that in a moment. Since his first full season in the majors, Fried has posted a 71-31 record with a 3.06 ERA. Only Yankees ace Garrett Cole, who has a 79-33 record, has more wins over the past 6 seasons than Fried, who went 11-10 with a 3.25 ERA, his highest ERA since 2020 in 29 starts in 2024, despite a brief stint on the IL with a forearm issue, the second year he's had that injury. Among pitchers with 800 or more innings in the past 6 seasons, only Cole at 2.98 has a lower ERA than Fried's 3.06. And since 2020, no pitcher who has thrown at least 500 innings has posted a lower ERA than Fried's 2.81. His 151 ERA plus is also the best in Major League Baseball over that span, 51% better than the league average. He's been a consistent 3 to 4 wins above replacement starter who's made 28 starts 4 times in the past 5 full Major League Baseball seasons. Fried will likely slot in behind Cole as the Yankees' number 2 starter, and having that pair at the top of the Yankees rotation gives them 2 of the most elite pitchers in baseball in terms of run prevention. Fried is a 4-pitch pitcher. Four-seam fastball, curveball, sinker, change. The curve, with its ridiculous looping action, is his most effective pitch. This past season, opponents had an anemic 285 slugging percentage against it, and it produced a 41.3% strikeout rate, which ranks 8th in Major League Baseball. His called strikes and whiffs on the curveball placed him in the 89th percentile. And as long as Fried can avoid any type of arm injury requiring a lengthy trip to the IL, he should continue to produce at a Cy Young level, even with the change in leagues. Then the Yankees traded Cortez and utility man Caleb Duran to Milwaukee for all-star closer David Williams, as Rabbi said, who has solidified himself as one of MLB's best relievers since making his debut in 2019. His 1.83 ERA in that time is topped only by Cleveland Guardians closer Emmanuel Clase's 1.65. The Yankees bullpen struggled in 2024 to a certain extent due to a lack of relievers who could generate strikeouts. With Williams, who's 14.3 Ks per nine, ranked fourth among all relievers in Major League Baseball, and Luke Weaver, who had an 11.0 strikeouts per nine, at the back end of their bullpen, that should no longer be an issue. Williams' best pitch is his air-bending changeup. Opponents hit just 162 against it in 24 and was a major improvement. And that was a major improvement considering they hit 097 against it in 2023. And it's a big reason why he's had very little difference in his left-right platoon splits over his career. Left-handed batters have managed just a 168, 293, 268 slash line against him. His fielding independent pitching, batting average against, and strikeout rate are all among the top 3 in the league. One of the biggest benefits of slotting Williams in as the closer is the Yankees can go back to using Weaver as a multi-innings weapon, a role in which he thrived before being thrust into the closer role after Clay Holmes faltered in the second half of 2024. The 2025 Yankees would love to see many a game play out where they have the lead after 6 innings and turn the ball over to Weaver and Williams to close out a win. With Fried paired with Cole at the top of the rotation and Williams paired with Weaver at the back end of the bullpen, the Yankees should be in a much better position to prevent runs from being scored against them, to offset an offense that, even with the acquisition of Cody Bellinger and potentially one more bat, is likely to take at least a half step back in scoring runs after losing a generational hitter like Juan Soto.
I'm interested to see what the dynamic between Williams and Weaver is going to be. That's something I'm very interested to see, just considering how Luke Weaver ended his 2024 and seeing if the best way for him to continue into 2025 is to kind of keep him familiar. So that's the thing I really, really, really want to see going forward, but we'll see what happens. Okay. For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, by the way, say his name when he appears. His name. Anyway, my name is Stephen Rabinowitz, and I am a proud Knicks and Yankees fan. I'm also a very hidden Rangers and Giants fan, so I will try to keep that silent for now.
Well done.
That's for another time. For the Jets, by the way, at least I know that's always a low bar that we can easily jump. Okay. YouTube.com/OnTheSportsLines on demand, Facebook.com/OnTheSportsLines live. And if you're there right now watching us, thank you. And Jay, where else?
Our Twitter handle is @ONTH Sportslines, where you'll find a link to each new show like tonight's, along with tidbits and nuggets from the world of sports that we think are worth your time to check out. This week, there's a link to a piece in The Athletic by Antonio Morales, whose regular gig is the beat writer for USC football. But for this, he takes on the role of being your guide for all the bandwagon fans looking for a team to root for or against in the new 12-team CFP playoffs as the first round kicks off on Friday. It's a clever piece and a fun read that is definitely worth your time to check out.
If you're in the Athletic, look at the pieces about the New York Jets today, because I have a feeling it's going to be mentioned again during our year-end awards, and that's coming up next Monday, December 30th, 8 p.m. Do not miss them. As we go quietly to the night, have a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. We'll see you right before the new year.
Night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.